Hey, everybody, this is Chris
and Kathy
from Petability Podcast. We wanted to take a minute to thank you all for tuning in. We appreciate every listener and are grateful for this platform.
Please help us share our vision by subscribing to Petability Podcast through your favorite streaming app. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Petability Podcast and share our content on social media.
You can also support the show by making a donation. Simply go to our website at petabilitypodcast.buzzsprout.com and click on the heart symbol at the top of the page. Thanks for listening.
We hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to Petability. I'm your host, Kathy Simons.
And I'm your host, Chris Cranston. Our podcast provides interviews and information to help your pets live their best lives.
Good afternoon, Chris. How are you today?
I am excellent, Kathy. Good to hear your voice as always. Very, very excited today because our topic is catapulting into special needs rescues. It's a little play on words.
I see what you did there.
We're going to talk about cats, and we haven't had an episode dedicated exclusively to cats to date.
I love cats, right? And I'm just going to start this podcast by saying that I believe wholeheartedly that cats are a superior creature to all living other things, humans, to everything. They're just a superior creature, and I'm really excited about our guest because I'm dying to talk to her about a couple of things. I'll let you lead into it.
Yes, Kathy, very, very excited to have Lillian Ciardelli, who is not only an expert in what we're about to talk about, but also a friend of mine. She is an applied animal behaviorist. And after graduating from Emory in 2010, Lillian knew that she wanted to work with animals, but was unable to decide between science and husbandry. So she picked both. For the last 9 years, Lillian has divided her career between animal research and hands-on animal care. She found that behavior consulting was the best way to share her love for behavioral science in a way that would make a real impact on individual animals and improve animal welfare. Lillian became an associate certified applied animal behaviorist in 2018 through the Animal Behavior Society. That's a big deal, everybody, if you don't know that.
That is a big deal. Yeah.
Looking to start her own business 1 year later, Lillian jumped on the opportunity to team up with Amy Campbell, her co-owner with a business called Behave Atlanta, and return to the warmth of Atlanta, Georgia. When Lillian isn't thinking about animals, she is photographing them, painting them, or writing about them. She can't wait to help anyone with their furry roommate. So welcome, Lillian.
Welcome, Lillian.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here and talk to you, Chris, again, and Kathy for the first time.
Absolutely. So Lillian and I go way back because when she was working with an animal behaviorist trainer named Audrey Carlson here in the Boston area, she sought out my business at Flow Dog. And Lillian, you want to talk a little bit about how you made that transition?
Sure. Yeah. So at the time I was working in the Museum of Science in their animal care department, as well as apprenticing with Audrey Carlson at Dog Willing. And I wanted to add something else, and she recommended Flow Dog, but she hadn't actually been there. She didn't take her dogs there. So I walked in one day and asked if I could shadow, and you were super open and welcoming. You said that you might not have a paid position, but that I could shadow until that point. And I was just beyond excited that you were even willing to let somebody in who didn't have a veterinary background or a vet tech background. And so that sort of began my pet rehab work.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I had just taken on a foster kitten. And at the time, I knew that the foster kitten was special needs, but I didn't quite understand what that would entail for me.
Right, right. And for me, I mean, you said, oh, you know, I was so open and willing to take you in. I was super excited because when I found out about your background, you know, being in Australia and working with the wombats, and I had to look up a wombat to even know, how did you describe them? They're like a bowling ball with legs or something, or?
Yeah, they're just like little they're like indestructible babies. They're just so dense and furry and thick. And I couldn't love an animal more than I love wombats.
And yeah, well, that's all you need to know about Lillian. And I remember some stories about kangaroos and about your work in, different, like you said, in zoos and so forth. And I also remember that when you were at Emory, that the professor that determined that animals get jealous, that monkey study, can you summarize that real briefly?
So Dr. DeWall is a very famous primatologist, and I was lucky enough to have him as a professor at Emory. And so he did a lot of work on animal behavior and the evolution of different emotions, including that what's called inequity and fairness research. So they're very well-known and well-watched studies on YouTube of different monkeys and apes reacting to being treated unfairly, which sounds horrible when I say it like that, but it's really, they trade in a token and they get something not as good as their partner got for the same token. And they will refuse to participate, basically. They will say, I'd rather have nothing than be cheated.
Yes. And they threw little tantrums, like when the partner monkey got a grape and that monkey got, like, I don't know, a dry piece of food or something, it'd be like, because they wanted the grape and they would refuse to eat, the token, as you said, that wasn't as delicious in their mind. So, so when I learned all this about Lillian, I'm like, I've got to have this woman near me and working with me. And so I knew with your background that it would be a great match in the physical rehabilitation arena as well, because so much of what we do in physical rehabilitation requires observations and reactions and things to things out from a behavioral point of view, what's going to work for that animal to get them to do the desired activity, the physical activity. And so anyway, enough said.
The thing that is exciting about what Lillian's going to talk about for me about recovering Sal, and I know you're going to give the details about what Sal's condition is, but just the use of environmental enrichment to get the cat to do what she needed him to do to recover. And he probably didn't even know that he was being manipulated in that way, even though they are the superior creature. But the use of environmental enrichment, or the use of this cat's innate, ingrained hunt, catch, kill, right? The fact that she used feather toys to get him to engage in chasing or pouncing, and bringing him up sort of to like a little boil and then down to a simmer and then back up. So I think it's brilliant. So I can't wait to hear more about Sal and the recovery.
Yes. You've got the floor, Lillian. Tell us about your experience with Sal.
Okay. So Sal was a little kitten that I got from the Animal Rescue League in Boston. And Sal had been rescued after enduring probably a car accident. It's not really clear, but when he was brought into the rescue league, he was had a severely broken right front limb, and his right hind leg hip area. This is where your expertise is better at describing things, but basically his hip got dislocated, and then the bone healed on the outside of the socket. So he had healed quite a bit from the injury, but obviously it wasn't really a good quality of life. And so the veterinarians at the Rescue League decided to save him, and they put in a lot of effort into a lot of surgeries so that he could potentially have a better life. And that involved a femoral head ostectomy, which you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Osteotomy.
Osteotomy already.
Femoral head and neck osteotomy, or FHO. We always say the acronym because otherwise it's too much of a mouthful.
Right. I should have just gone with that. So
lesson learned.
Basically, they remove that big nubbin on the leg bone, and then the hip is able to fuse without the bone actually there. Is that
right? Right. Creates
close?
A false
Okay.
joint. Yep. Okay. And they do quite well.
And then the right limb, they just removed completely. Right.
So they disarticulated that. And So there's nothing there. It's just the rib cage. I think they take off the scapula and everything because if they leave any bone remaining, it can poke out and cause injuries and problems down the road. So it sounds horrible and very barbaric, but again, they typically do quite well with either one of those surgeries. But the challenge for Sal was...
Yes, he had everything done at once. So you've seen a 3-legged cat, or you've seen dogs that have had these types of FHOs or cats that have had them, but to have both of those surgeries at the same time, it's really difficult for him to heal because he's got his no right front arm basically, and his left hind leg is in a lot of pain.
Yeah,
so
severely compromised. Yeah.
Yep. So my job for the first few weeks of having him was just to help him heal and recover and keep him moving. And I was really worried about that in the beginning because I didn't know how much pain he would be in.
Mm-hmm.
And he was such a trooper. From the first day that he came to my apartment, he was out of his little crate, running around exploring. And then he kind of attached to me and just wanted to be in whatever room I was in. So already I had one way of moving him around, which was to just walk around.
Well, that's pretty simple.
Yeah.
But, like you said, it could have been the contrary because we all know, and we're talking like we don't know his background, right? So, did he come from a home and escape and then have this horrible accident and nobody found him for some time? Or, was he always feral, as they say, which feral just means non-tame, but it seemed like he was pretty friendly, from the get-go. But, if you're bringing a cat in from the outdoors or through rescue or that sort of thing, oftentimes the first thing they do is find a place and hide. And so you're right, Lillian, that he helped you out in that respect.
Yeah.
And walking is your very first basic sort of go-to when you're rehabbing FHOs. Like walking would be my very first thing. So the fact that he came in and started walking around, you're already on step one, right? You're already in your step one phase of helping with that FHO, right?
And so functional, right? You got to walk to do anything.
You got to walk.
So.
Yep. And then the second part was preventing him from further injuring himself while he was recovering. I didn't want him to pull a muscle or anything, especially in that joint that was rebuilding. So I provided him a lot of traction, which I just listened to your entire podcast episode about it, and it's so great. I used a lot.
Thank you. Let me interject here. More people need to listen to the traction episode because Kathy and I are so passionate about it, and it's not getting the no pun intended, the traction yes, that we would like in terms of our listeners because it's so valuable. So please tune into that, and thank you for that plug, Lillian. Okay, go on.
Yep. So I did a lot of the traction, interventions that are not invasive for the cat. So basically I just added a lot of carpeting and soft surfaces to my apartment, which had wood slippery floors, so that Sal could move around without sliding and potentially hurting himself. And then in places where he needed to jump up or down or was likely to try, I added little steps and ramps with traction. So pieces of yoga mats, or I would put carpet samples over certain things, tape them on so that he could step up onto boxes without slipping. Because I was also very concerned that when he hopped down from a height, all of the pressure was going to go into his left front limb. He could get up places pretty easily by using both of his back legs, but then when he was on the way down, all of that force was going onto the left. So I wanted him to not be jumping very far.
Right. So you were breaking down that height into smaller and smaller steps, if you will, heights, as well as providing traction so that he could use his claws. So you think about it, he now has 50% less claws on the front limbs because one leg is gone.
It's gone.
And the shock absorption. So by adding yoga mats, non-skid, towels that are secured, like you said, carpet squares, that sort of thing, the environment is helping to shock absorb. So that's fantastic.
Yep. I also knew that he was going to need a lot of vet visits because he was going to have to go back to the vet at the shelter to get new medicine, to get checked up. So another thing that I wanted to do was not have that be stressful for him. So right from the beginning, I kept his little carrier out. I threw treats in there. I played with him in there. I just basically left it as an area that he could go into. Sometimes I closed the door for a second and then reopened it. But I wanted the carrier to not be a place of fear, since I knew I was going to need him to be able to go in there a lot, and also not chase him around the house right before. So that was another strategy that actually worked really well. He had no trouble or concerns about going into his carrier.
Yes.
And the fear piece is really important too in rehabbing, any animal, but the fear piece, or getting that trust, is so important. And that fear is real. It's real for these animals. If they become frightened or startled, you can have a setback and you can have an injury. So that fear piece is vital, and people always ask me when I rehab cats, well, how do you rehab cats? And I always go, well, very carefully, right? Because I don't want to get scratched, but also I don't want to have setbacks because I've created a fear situation. So I thought that was great that you were able to break that cycle of any type of fear surrounding the carrier, things like it's quality of life.
And you did it on the front end. You didn't wait for him to be scared and then try to go back, which is 100 times harder, to get rid of that fear once it's instilled. So, to our listeners out there, I think that, anything that you can do, whether, it's your dog in the crate or your cat in the carrier, and making that a safe and positive place from the get-go is just so, so important.
Yep. Yeah, it ended up being so helpful. He also had a wonderful personality. Like, he was so friendly, loved attention. So that did make my life a lot easier, but I did put in that effort in the front end just to make sure that it wouldn't be difficult in the end.
Absolutely. Yeah. You had good foresight, sometimes I think we always say our hindsight's 20/20, but you had excellent foresight. So.
Lillian, this cat was so darn cute. I don't you probably had to resist every instinct you had to scoop him up and just
oh my gosh,
snuggle and smush him and squeeze him. So kudos, because I would have had to bite my lip oh God, he's so cute.
Yeah, he is remarkably cute. And I actually have had a few friends who were staunch anti-cat people saying I only like this cat, and this cat is incredible.
he's amazing. I know.
Yeah, he was so sweet.
But to the defense of cats, I think a lot of times for non-cat people, they do tend to lump them all into one category and rather stereotype and think that, all cats are aloof and all cats are going to, scratch and bite and that sort of thing. But there's a plethora of personalities out there. And I've had so many, quote, dog-like cats, that come when called and, fetch. I would wad up pieces of paper and they go, fetch it and bring it back to me, and we play fetch. And, they're highly trainable creatures as well because they're so smart. But anyway, I just want to, since this is a cat episode, I wanted to put a plug in for all cats out there.
Yes, that was important. So
tell us a little bit more about Sal and his physical rehabilitation.
So after the first few weeks, I took him back, and they decided that he was healing well, but he really did need some physical rehab and not just sort of injury prevention, which I had been doing. And so they gave me some exercises. Dr. Meckler is the vet that was working with them.
Yes, and I know Annette Meckler. Yes.
She was really helpful in explaining to me what to do, because at that point I wasn't working with you yet and I had no idea what any of this meant. But they basically asked me, do I want to continue to work with him and take him home for another few weeks and try to do this physical therapy? And I was super excited. So I got the home remedy, and some things worked and some things didn't. And
yes, which is often true, right, Kathy?
No, it's true for all animals, right?
Yes, for all animals.
Yeah. And so my favorite part, I think, about it was being creative and trying to figure out how to get Sal into certain positions when he was comfortable, so that I could actually do them and not stress him out too much. So things that were easy for me were to get him to move around and play. And so for weight shifting, I would take a toy, like a string toy or a cat dancer, and kind of shift it back and forth so he would stand up on his hind legs, and then I could move it so that he would weight bear on either side.
Mm-hmm.
And I always made a point to do that on a surface where he had traction.
Mm-hmm.
I also needed to do some range of motion, and that actually ended up being a more difficult thing for me because he really did not like that. So he wasn't ever very food motivated, not motivated enough to not be able to focus on what I was doing. So I decided after a couple of tries, because I was living alone and I didn't have anybody that was there to be able to safely restrain him so that I could move a leg in the proper range of motion.
Right.
What I did instead was I would use the warm compress on him when he was relaxed next to me. And then I would do a gentle massage. And when he was stretching or something, I would note his range of motion so that I could report it back. But I wasn't actually going to physically put him into it because that was really stressful for him.
So you were doing things to kind of coax that range of motion and have him do it actively. And then, like you said, taking mental notes or pictures to show the vet where he was.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then another thing that they recommended was for him to just stand on his hind legs for a while. And the best way to do that with a cat is to have some sort of lickable food at a higher elevation so that they stand up and just lick it. But he wasn't food motivated enough to do that. But what he did really like was looking out the window. And so I would prop him up so that he could look out the window with his front limbs on the windowsill and his back feet on a little step. And then he would stay there. And I would count the amount of time.
Reward as well as therapy. Look out the window at the birds.
Yeah, so that was good. And then the last thing, I really needed him to put force on that leg. And I ended up using what's called a Kong kickaroo, which is this little stuffed tube that cats can hold on to with their whole body and kind of bunny kick. And that was the only time that he would really substantially use that leg. And it worked really well for him. So it was just a lot of figuring out what he was willing to do. And he really was into play. So anything that was play related, I could trick him into working out and he had a great time. Things where I was physically manipulating him, he was less into. So
right. And I think that's typically true of cats.
It's brilliant, and it's brilliant for all animals, not just cats, but even when I'm working with dogs or birds, if you could, engaging any animal in play is such a social activity for them, and it's so enriching, right? And they may forget that they don't put weight on that leg because they're playing, right? So they're engaged in what's happening. Maybe they're not necessarily thinking about putting that, I can put that leg down. It will hold me up, because we're engaged in the play. And I love the looking out the window because this is a cat's life, right? This is what they like for environmental enrichment. They want to look out that window and see what's out there, the bugs, the birds, whatever. So he's engaged in that. And that's great because if you had has anybody ever forced a cat to do anything? Because that always goes badly. You don't force a cat to do anything.
It has to be their idea.
It has to be, it has to be their idea. But if you had forced that, I don't think it would have gone as well to engage him in this social interaction of playing. Not to mention how tremendously bonding that is for you two. You're playing and he relates to you. He's made that association. She brings good things. I go to the window. I play the feather toy. So he's made this nice association with you. And play and fun, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also used that same strategy because he didn't really like to be carried or held. And so I didn't need him to be carried around that much, but there are times when he needed to be moved. So I wanted him to enjoy being carried more or at least tolerate it. And so in order to get him to deal with it, I basically in the beginning would only lift him or carry him to get him to a better vantage point somewhere where he could see. So if he was sitting somewhere right next to me on the floor and I was on the couch, I would pick him up and put him on the couch, and then that would be his little being carried for 1 second.
Yep. And would you actually say that you are desensitizing the cat to this? Because you think of desensitizing or desensitization in dogs a lot. So you think about dogs that are fearful or dogs that are reactive. We don't think about it so much in cats. Would you call it this process maybe desensitizing him to that handling?
Yeah, so I would say it was both desensitization and positive reinforcement, because the desensitization was handling him for a short amount of time before he had any sort of stress response. I wanted to keep him basically below threshold, put him down before he wiggled so he wasn't worked up by it. And then he was also being rewarded for that behavior. And the reward was more functional. It was being able to see, being able to sit next to me, getting to a new location that he hadn't explored before. And so that was sort of the other piece of it. Rather than just holding him for longer and longer periods of time, I also wanted to add on another reward on top of that.
What cat doesn't like that? Reward.
You talked about his stress level too. And just so our listeners out there know, we're going to have a link to an article that is published related to Lillian's experience with Sal, and that will be on our website in the show notes, where you can see video and pictures and see how darn cute he is. But
so cute.
Yes. So in that article, you have a series of pictures that you can see the level of dilation in Sal's eyes, and you use that as a cue, right, to know what his level of stress or anxiety was?
Yeah, so I actually use that basically to judge his level of stimulation. Sort of, it's kind of like arousal, a neutral term. It can be negative. It can also be like fun and excited, just like our pupils dilate when we see somebody we love. It's kind of a neutral response, but it is a cue that something's going on in there. And so for him, after he was with me for a few weeks, he started to really blossom into his true personality, which many people who have taken in pets will know. All of a sudden, after 3 weeks, they kind of come out of their shell. Mm-hmm. And for him, that meant, and he also started to feel better. So he was moving around more, playing more. And when that happened, his play turned kind of pesky, and he would bite me when he got too excited. And so I ended up using his eye dilation levels as a cue that I needed to stop playing with him and give him a break so that he could sort of reset and calm down a little bit. And then we would restart the play when he was in a little bit better of a mental state. And it's interesting when you interrupt that sort of one-way train of excitement in a dog or a cat, they'll do a displacement behavior, which is they're going to channel their stress into a different thing. So you might see them all of a sudden start grooming. And it's kind of like I'm calming down. I'm going to do something else now. Sorry, that was weird.
I'm pulling myself together. I'm going to pull myself together.
Yeah.
But it's sort of like a boil and simmer. And that's a natural thing for cats, I think, too, that they sort of like, again, if I go back to talking about the hunt, catch, kill, it's part of the hunt. And then the catch is really stimulating, and then the kill, but you want to try and get them into a neutral before they get to that kill stage. You want to get them into more of a neutral, you're right, not above threshold, not where they can't come back from.
Yes. Yep. And that was important to me, because I just didn't want to be bit, but also because he was a foster and he needs to have behaviors that are going to be nice for an adopter to have. Like they can all be worked on at a later date, but while he's with me, I don't want to encourage behaviors that are going to cause him to be more difficult to adopt.
Yeah, right. And he was waking you up at night. When I was reading the article, I read that he was waking you up a little bit at nighttime. And what did you end up doing about that?
Yeah, so he wasn't waking me up in the middle of the night. It was more in the morning. He was like, "It's time to wake up. Let's play." And if I didn't get up, he would just gently bite me. And
the love bite. It's the love bite, yeah.
Yeah, it was like, okay, come out, time to get up. And I did not want to reinforce that because that's very annoying. And also, it's really difficult not to reinforce biting with attention because it's really hard not to ignore a bite, especially if you were woken up by that bite. You're going to wake up and you're going to react to it. So... And
for our listeners, let's just talk about like what that attention may be, right? Because people may not realize. So like you vocalize or you push him away or whatever. That's all attention, even if it's not positive attention necessarily.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that dogs and cats and any really animal that does something for attention, they're not really discriminating between positive and negative attention, because what they want is you to look at them and to notice them and then to interact. So when I woke up in the morning and he would bite me, I would probably like wake up and say, ow. And then maybe a couple minutes later, I'd be like, okay, I'm up. And I would get up, or I would start laughing because it was so bizarre, in my opinion.
Which is attention.
Yep. Or I would hide and I would try to get away from him, or I would try to move that limb. And for cats, what they want to do is chase. So as soon as you move your arm, they get to chase something. So that was difficult. And I took a few different approaches to that. So I wanted to decrease his motivation for doing that. So a lot of the time when dogs and cats want attention, they might not be getting enough in other areas of life. So I made sure to play with him a lot right before bed, because I couldn't really play with him while I was sleeping, but you kind of want to time it before they start to show those behaviors so that you can drain their little tank of needing attention. And so I did that right before bed. I scheduled a playtime with him, and that really required a timer, because sometimes, I'm going to be honest, and this is a horrible thing to say as an animal lover, but sometimes it can be kind of boring, and you are playing with a cat and you think you've been playing with them forever, and you've been playing with them for 3 minutes. So I set a 15-minute timer, and I was like, I will play with you for 15 minutes. I'm not going to stop until that timer goes off, because with a cat, it like moving a little dangly thing around can be really monotonous, but you want to be focused on them. You don't want to be multitasking, because that's not that fun for them.
That's a great idea to use a timer for compliance.
Yep. I also then had to remove the reinforcer. So my reinforcer for Sal was attention. And I just described to you how difficult it can be to remove the attention. So what I did was I would hide under my covers and not respond. And it literally, I felt like a child who was trying not to laugh or like let their parents know that they were actually awake.
Yeah.
I just had to smother all my, like everything under the blanket and not move. And it was kind of funny because I would start laughing again, because it seemed if anybody had seen me, I looked like I was hiding from a tiny little cat.
Ludicrous
in
image.
our house, in our house, we call that the Kathy vacation. So if Mac has done, if he's done something that I'm trying to ignore, and I go into the bathroom, I close the door, I stay in there for about 2 minutes, I come back out. So it's called go on a little vacation from each other.
Yep. Yeah. I would try to wake up earlier so that it was less likely that he would feel the need to pester me awake. And that did help. And then the last approach was to reinforce appropriate behavior. So when he stopped attacking me, if he just sat down and gave up, I would get up and immediately start playing with him. On days that he didn't attack me, I would immediately get up and start playing with him. And I really wanted him to learn that being quiet and waiting was the way to get me to wake up and play with him, and that biting me in the morning was not going to work.
Okay, Lillian, can we now officially say that cats can be trained, right? We can officially say
yes,
cats can be trained.
They certainly can be trained. And one thing that I've learned as I'm reading more and researching more and going on more consults is that cats, they just have different motivations than dogs. And so for Sal, it was play. And they also need shorter training sessions with more precise cues. So clicker training can be really good for cats, 3 to 5 minute training sessions before they lose their interest in what you're doing. It's not that they can't be trained. It's just that it's not exactly the same as it looks in other animals, and you might have to change the reward, or you might have to change the speed, but it's definitely can be done.
It has to be something of value to the cat. Whatever the reward is has to be something of value to the cat. And I think I laugh about it and joke saying that cats can be trained. The cats are extremely intelligent, and maybe there is a misconception that they can't be trained. But I think your ideas are brilliant. Keep it short. Have a reward that the cat really wants, something that's valuable to them, not you. What's valuable to them to carry this reward, to carry this out, right?
Yeah, they are often not quite as food motivated as dogs, or not for the same treats. You have to be really creative with them, but that's why it's so much more rewarding, I think, when you are able to train them, because it's just a matter of figuring out what motivates your cat. Sometimes it's just attention and love.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it's a great bonding experience, really, when you're able to do something like that with your cats. It's a great bonding experience for the two, for owner and cat.
Yeah, and that is a fun way to play with them. I mean, now I just feel really guilty about saying it's not fun to play with cats, because that is not true. But it is hard to play with them and keep your attention on only them for a long period of time. You want to like be listening to something or like be on the phone with somebody, and anything, especially this happens when you take dogs out on walks too. People are on the phone and they're not truly engaging with the animal. And so that can be really difficult because they never fully have your attention. And we do want to give that to them.
So and we've lost something in that. We're not paying attention when we walk our animals or our dogs, or we've lost something in that when we're on the phone playing with the cat. That's, we really want it to be an experience for both of you, engaged. Yeah.
This is an aha moment for me, because I've seen, I can picture exactly what Lillian is talking about, where, you're watching Netflix or whatever, and you have the string toy and you're just mindlessly, waving it around. And I think that I certainly didn't realize this until today, that many people, when they're playing, whether with any of their pets, are kind of like going through the routine, right? You said like the monotony of it, but what you're saying, Lillian, then, just to be clear, is that you have to be making eye contact, talking to them, and being focused, because the animal, the pet, perceives that difference.
Yeah, and especially when there's plenty of dogs who, as soon as you pick up your phone, they know, like, okay, they're not paying attention anymore. Like, that is a pretty good cue that you've lost interest in them, or you're not going to be noticing what they're doing. And for cats, when you're playing with them, a lot of what they're interested in is chasing a prey item or something that looks like a prey item. And if you're multitasking, there are going to be times where they catch it, or you're slow and you're not responding to them, and they're going to lose interest because they feel like this isn't fun.
It's not fun.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Love it.
Plus, the more you observe them, the more you learn about, like, it is much more fun, I think, when you are paying attention to them, because you can realize and notice their different play styles and what they're doing. And then when you go out and buy more toys, you can think, okay, they really like this, or I bet they could solve this problem because I saw them doing that thing. So it is also really fun to try to take pictures of them when they're playing as a lab.
Oh, listen, there's a whole part of the internet that's just dedicated to just watching cats, and I'm involved in it. I watch those YouTube videos. I love to watch them play. I love to watch them hunt. They're an extraordinary animal with extraordinary talents. So I love watching cats, and I love to think about what might be going on in that cat's head. Just the intelligence level is just engaging to me. And I had an experience not that long ago rehabbing a kitten as well, Lillian. His name is my very best cat friend. His name is Mingus. Oh. And Mingus was I loved Mingus. I love him. He's still with us. I love him. His foster mom was called out to the scene. She rescues kittens. She rescues kittens, and she does a trap and neuter and release. And so oftentimes people call her when they have stray kittens in their yard and so forth. And they called her because Mingus was injured. And when Mingus got to us, it was very evident that Mingus had some type of spinal cord injury, probably very early on in his life. He was probably only about 8 or 9 weeks old when we got him, and minimal function of his hind legs. And again, we had to develop, a plan for Mingus where we could engage him in things that he would be willing to participate in. And, and sometimes actually, if I'm lucky, I can actually sometimes get cats to use the pool or the underwater treadmill, if you condition them very carefully and slowly. Mingus wasn't having any of that. So it's like, what does Mingus like to do? What does he like to do? It turns out Mingus likes to raise other foster kittens. That was Mingus's motivation.
Oh.
I know. Mingus is an empath for sure. Like, he's just this little angel on earth. And these are his motivations. Like, he wants to get up and see the kittens. He wants to be able to groom them. He wants to be able to interact with them. And this allows him more mobility. He's up, he's moving. He's doing some of the things that cats would do, that play, the pounce, the but teaching the other kittens how to play and pounce as well, or interact with cats. And so that was a big motivation for him. And what we ended up doing for Mingus is, because he's just so strong in the front end and so strong with his core, as most cats are, we got him a mobility cart. And so he got much more mobility by being in that cart. So again, and it allowed me so many more ways to engage his muscles. Put him in the mobility cart and have him walk. Put him in the mobility cart and have him, get on the Bosu ball. Put him in the mobility cart and have him play with kittens. So it was a big piece for him as far as his quality of life is concerned. But the whole thing about motivation for me is kittens.
Yeah, that's unique.
Love me. I know. Mingus is the best. If you saw him, I want to take a little bite out of him. He's just so cute, and he's just so sweet, and his little cat toes are so cute. And he's a very gentle, easygoing spirit, which is the thing that was most endearing about. Is the thing that is the most endearing about Mingus. It's just a gentle, calm spirit, and I think that translates to these new kittens that are coming in. Like, I'm calm, you're calm. There's nothing to be upset about. I'm not upset. You should be upset, right? So he's a very special guy. Again, there's a misconception that cats aren't good candidates for rehab, but they really are. They can be.
And in preparing for our discussion today, our chat, we realized that all of the cats and kittens that we're going to be discussing today were actually from a rescue/foster background. And so, oftentimes we don't know what has happened to them in their early life and how they ended up with these physical and or emotional scars. And I recently began fostering with an organization out here called Broken Tail Rescue. And I've had two kittens that had some special needs and some physical challenges, and I'll talk about those in a bit. But I just want to say to our listeners out there that cats are incredible creatures physically as well. And I've said this many times in my career, but I think it was a vet that told me early on that if a cat's bones are in the same room, they will heal.
Right.
So they are just amazing creatures evolutionarily, and they just have this capacity to heal and carry on. And so, for those out there that may be a little bit hesitant to look into an adoption of a cat that has some, physical challenges, I would encourage you to pursue it and see if it's something that might work out for you, because oftentimes over time, you don't even know that they're missing that leg or, whatever the case may be, because they continue to lead great, full, rich lives. Yeah.
Mother Nature has been very kind to the cat with regards to healing. It's remarkable.
Yes, it truly is. So a little bit about the two fosters that I had. I think that they reached out to me initially. It was a vet that this cat had been in the vet clinic living for a couple of months, and she really wanted to get it out of the clinic because it was in a 2x2 cage, most of the time. And she's like, he's getting bigger and we have to get him out of there. Why he was living there is that when he was trapped, there was a large gash in his right hind limb groin area that was about 4 inches long. And he was only like a 6-month-old cat at the time, maybe 4 to 6 months. And so that's huge. And the wound almost went through the other side. So it started on the inside, like I said, the groin area, and almost through to the skin on the outside of the leg. So this was a deep wound that was not healing and took a lot of care and so forth. And, with time and with proper care, it was getting better and better. But because this cat was found with an injury that was not known, how did the cat get this? It had to be under rabies quarantine. And fortunately, I am rabies vaccinated. And in Massachusetts, that means 4 months before they can be adopted, whether at any age. They have to be quarantined for 4 months to ensure that they don't have rabies before they're adopted. So he came to my house and I had him for a couple of months. And like Lillian, he loved to eat, but I'm not the trainer she is. So I wasn't all that successful. It was more the play and trying to get him there was significant atrophy in that right hind limb. He was short strided. He couldn't extend his right hind leg as much. And what really struck me when I first got him was that he was just staying on the floor. And he was in a bedroom is where I had him quarantined because I have other animals in the household. And so I never saw him jumping up on the bed or anything like that. And I'm like, well, that's because he doesn't have the range of motion or strength in that leg in order to do so. So I was using the toys and things too to try to get him to push off, that power from his hind end and be upwardly mobile. And sure enough, over time, I remember one time I brought him in the bathroom with me and boop, he just jumped up on the vanity. And I was like, where did that come from? So he did great. And I also tried to do like massage and passive stretching and things like that. And not as much of a fan, but I could do it. And the good news was that I was able to interact with his future adopters and give them some instructions. And she sent me pictures and video and things like that. And he looks great. His gait now is wonderful. And yes, and he jumped up on the mantle, above their fireplace. And, so he's not having any mobility issues and he's getting that power back. So, that's just a great happy ending. And Lillian, tell us a little bit about where Sal ended up, speaking of that.
So once Sal was ready for adoption, the Animal Rescue League of Boston put out a story about his recovery, and the requests for him just flooded in. And up until that point, I had seriously considered keeping him because he was so loving and so unique. All my friends loved him. He came home with me for Easter. My family loved him. And my family had always been saying, like, don't get a pet yet. Wait till you're more like in a more stable situation, till you have a house or till you know what the next move is. And I wanted him so badly. But what made the difference for me was the more I played with him, he continued to sort of have that active play style. And I looked into it and it really was an appropriate play style for other cats, just not for a human recipient. So I really felt that he would be a good match for a household with another cat because he was so playful. Also, when I returned home from work every day, he would come running to the door or hobbling, I should say.
And he missed you. He wanted interaction.
Yeah. And I just felt horrible that I was gone sometimes 10 hours a day at one of my jobs. And I felt that he should be in a home where somebody's either working from home or he has another cat to be with. So as difficult as the decision was, I sort of made the leap and hoped that when he did get adopted, it would be to a home that would be better than with me. And the Rescue League was super supportive and allowed me to have some input on who the adopter would be. So I went through all of these applications. And the nice thing for pets that have 3 legs or any sort of visible injury is that they do tend to be adopted pretty quickly because people feel a lot of empathy for them and they want to help them. So that is something that is nice, but it can also be difficult because sometimes people are not really understanding what it means to have a dog or a cat with a disability. So I read through all these applications and some of them said things like, I think they'd be a great match. We have 2 large dogs and 3 little toddlers. And I thought, oh my gosh, no. he needs play, but not that much. Like I'm also protective over him. I want him to feel good. And so I had 2 adopters that looked good and really seemed like they would be a good match for him. And one was set up, I think, for a Saturday to come visit him at my apartment. And the next, that was the first candidate. And then somebody else said, I'm also interested. Can I come on Friday? And so she came first and she looked at him and she just fell in love and said that she had another 3-legged cat at home, also from the Rescue League. He was missing a hind leg. And I think my heart exploded because
That was it. That was it.
this was the most perfect match, because one of my fears had been that if he's matched with another cat, that cat might lead him onto high shelves where he can't get down from. But not a cat without a high leg.
Right. No, you thought that through.
Yeah, I overthought it, some would say.
That's my friend Lillian.
But what was nice was the first adopter who basically had first dibs because she hadn't even made it there yet. I had told her somebody else came today and they, I think, would be a really great match. Obviously, we're still going to let you come and look at him if you're interested. And she said, if you think this other person is a great match, then I really want this cat to have his best life. So I'm okay with you giving it to the first adopter, which that was so nice. And I'm even getting chills just thinking about it, because that person also deserves the best cat in the world. So that was a really selfless thing to do. So now Sal is living his best life with his cat friend. They hang out all the time. They play all the time. He still sleeps in between the owners. I actually just asked for an update yesterday, and she emailed me and said things are going so well. The cats love each other. They play together all the time. His biting and nipping of people almost disappeared because he really he just wanted to play with another cat, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Once he's engaged with that other cat, yeah. You know, I went out to Utah last year to the Best Friends Animal Sanctuary, and I
love that place.
I know. And I was waiting for my tour, and they had a couple of cats in that area. And one of them was this beautiful orange cat who turned out to be a girl cat, which I think is unusual for the color. But in any case, she said, would you like to play with this cat? Would you like to meet her? And I said, oh yes, I'd love to. And I opened up her cage and I patted her, and she did everything. She was playing and, slow blinking and just adorable. And the lady said, well, you can take her out if you want. But she goes, oh, but she only has 3 legs. And I was like, are you kidding me? That makes her like 100 times more awesome. I was out of my mind. And she was the greatest. You wouldn't even know. She was missing a hind leg, but she was up and down on those shelves, and she was engaged. And you wouldn't have known, that she had been missing this leg. And I thought it made her like 1,000 times more awesome personally. But it was incredible to see that I didn't even notice. And this is my job. I'm a rehabber. I should have noticed. I didn't. But that's just to speak to how well she has adapted, right?
Absolutely. Hey, Kathy, when you were at Best Friends, I've been there twice. And like Kathy said, it's in Kanab, Utah. And we hope to be able to interview somebody from that sanctuary at some point, because it is an amazing, amazing place.
It really is.
And I think it's the largest sanctuary in the United States in terms of not only physical space and having, hundreds of acres, but also I think at any given time they have about 1,300 animals there of all different varieties. Mm-hmm. But when I went, they have the cats are kind of in these huts, these wonderful facilities, and they're separated out by different maybe conditions or ailments or whatever, have brought them to be in rescue. And I went into one that had Manx cats. Do you know what Manx cats are?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you know why they were so many of them at Best Friends?
No.
Because, so Manx cats, I wanted to, research this a little bit. And what I found out was that it was a genetic defect, if you will, on this Isle of Man. I'm not even sure where that is. And hundreds of years ago that resulted in a bobbed tail. Mm-hmm. So it made them incredibly cute. But the tail, as we know, is an extension of the spine, right? It's the coccygeal vertebrae. So not only are those vertebrae missing to make this little nubbins, but it also affects their pelvis and their sacrum and the other parts of their spine.
I did not know that.
Yes. And so they have what's called Manx syndrome, which is like spina bifida.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are abnormalities of the spinal cord resulting in a hopping gait or a plantigrade stance where they're kind of walking on their heels, not up on their toes, incontinence, urinary and fecal incontinence, and really lack of sensation and motor sometimes. And it's in its extreme, it can be paraplegia. So meaning that the back legs don't work. So here are all these cats, I mean, dozens of them that have this Manx syndrome, and some were better than others, but they actually have a physical therapy program at Best Friends. And we'll put a link on our show notes to Best Friends as well, and specifically the Manx Cats. But similar to what we're saying, I just read an article about using baby food on a spoon, and this Manx cat was being lured up some carpeted stairs via the baby food and gaining strength. And when I was there, I had the pleasure of taking a cat on a leash and harness, and you went to the other huts in the area and you knocked on the door and you said, "Trick or treat." And any time of year, and the staff or volunteers in that particular hut would come and they would give a treat to the cat. So he was very food motivated, and he knew, and he would just march on his little path in his harness to the next hut, and we go trick or treat, he'd get a treat, and then we go on to the next. It was awesome. So again, talking about, the various motivations and things. So, getting outside, getting to move, you talked about Mingus being in a cart, and, they certainly had, again, cats in harnesses, wearing diapers, whatever the case may be, but, it's doable, but definitely a challenge.
Yeah, it is. It is. But we got to get out there, Chris. We got to get out there.
I know. I'm going again, I swear. After I went the first time, I said I'm going to go every year. And then, of course, life happens. But I did make it back again. And I think I'm going to make it this year as well. That's the plan to go this fall. So I will have more to report back.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So is there anything else? Any last words that any of us want to share? I think this was a great show, particularly talking about the juxtaposition of behavior and physical and how they both interact and intersect to have the best outcomes. I think in all animals, not only
and
cats.
I think that this has inspired me to talk to you about doing a show exclusively on amputations and how well pets can do with amputations. So maybe that's my takeaway too. Maybe people need to know more about amputations in pets and dispel some of the myths about amputations in pets. So that's my
myths. And like Lillian said too, like maybe I think that we all kind of have some bleeding heart, and we're like, oh, we want to take in that animal, but the difference between a front limb amputation versus a hind limb amputation, and how
it's different.
The adaptations that we may need to make in their environment to have them be most successful and be most comfortable long term, and like mitigating arthritic changes and adaptations that could be to their physical being over time. We're digressing. We're digressing.
I have one more comment. Just to bring full circle why I thought I could bring sort of my background to physical therapy, and then what I learned about it when I was there. So I knew that I would be able to use applied animal behavior and training to get dogs and cats to do the specific exercises. But when I worked with you, I realized that going through the exercises and being there with their owners and their owners cheering them on and paying attention and leading them through all these exercises made such a difference for the animals' well-being when they were there. And they would, like, on day 1 are afraid to go in the door, and on day 3 are breaking down the door to come in. And it was not only because of the physical benefit that they were getting, but also that this is an hour where their owner is only paying attention to them.
Yep.
And that so much. And it made me realize that is what physical therapy brings, in addition to a physical help, but it's an emotional attention thing that these dogs and cats maybe haven't gotten until they got injured. And now also their owners realize what they're capable of and what training can do for them. And it's just such a happy place to be.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for
That's a
for
great wise
noting
word.
that.
That's a great ending. Yeah.
Yes. And again, I learned so much through reading your article and love seeing the videos and pictures. So folks, please check that out on our show notes, because I think, what on earth is that? Your snoring pug, Kathy?
Sorry, that's my snoring pug. Sorry, I didn't mean to. I'm not going to edit that out either. I'm going to leave that in. That's my snoring pug.
Yes, I just want to say I hoped that was your snoring pug and not the alternative. So
No, it's my snoring pug. Sorry.
Well, on that note, I guess we can bid you adieu. Thanks again, Lillian, for all your time.
Thank you, Lillian.
Helping not only Kathy and me, but our listeners as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed our show. Follow us on Facebook or on Instagram at Petability Podcast.
For more information about Kathy's books and living with blind dogs, please go to enableyourpet.com. Thank you, and please tune in next time.